Welcome back, everybody. This is lesson 11 of developing a dynamic website from start to finish. In the last video, we connected our database to our website and started pulling the content for the pages dynamically from the database. And now we're going to get a little more in-depth. We're going to start talking about building your own functions and kind of sprucing this up a bit. So we're going to start by opening up our index.php, and or first let's go ahead and open up setup as well. So we'll keep both these documents open. Depending on which Dreamweaver you're using, you can also see setup here as one of the linked files. So however you want to do that, it's fine. One of the purposes of this setup file is to kind of keep the index page clean. And by clean, I mean just minimal code, and kind of attractive. And that sounds weird, but once you do get done with this, you'll kind of notice how you can make this index page look nice from the code end, where it's not just a bunch of just lines and lines and lines of code. So to start with that, we're going to take, depending on whether you're right along with us or not, as far as where you've got everything lined up, that may be different, but we're going to take line 5 down to line 13, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it, Control X, and we're going to go over to setup, and just below the data, the database connection, go ahead and paste Control V. And then let's go ahead, and we don't need all this spacing here. A lot of this is up to you. As long as you understand what's going on here, you can kind of tighten this up. It doesn't need to be all spaced out. Go ahead and save this, and then go back to our index file and save that. We can even kind of get rid of some of those lines there too. Save that. Clean that up. So we're shortening things up here a little bit. And one of the big things we're going to do to shorten things up is, if you notice, when we were using the include function, things were a lot cleaner. We didn't have this query here and all that. So we want to bring it back to being kind of like that. So what we're going to do is create a new file and a new folder, actually. So if you go over here to your files panel, right click on the root here and say new folder, and we're going to call this functions. One of the things that I generally do, and this is not necessarily what everybody does, is I create a file called Sandbox whenever I'm going to start doing things that I don't necessarily have a home for yet, or an organization plan for. I just kind of throw them all in the Sandbox file. Sometimes I'll have a sandbox.css when I've got a bunch of rules that I've made in CSS that I don't really, either I was in a hurry or I haven't really figured out how I want to organize them. I just kind of throw them all in there. So that's something I do, and that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to create a new file, Control N. It's going to be PHP. Click Create, and like normal, we're going to get rid of all the HTML that's in there. Let's go ahead and save this. Go to your functions folder, and we're going to call this Sandbox. And Sandbox is a pretty common term for an area where you're going to mess around with code. So we've got that, yet it's not linked to our site in any way yet. So in our setup file, let's go ahead here, and in between the database connection and the whole get page little block there, let's include that. Include, and in single quotes, functions slash sandbox.php. Now, you might think, depending on how savvy you are, that we would need to put a // here because setup is in another folder and we'd have to go back and then into functions. But since this setup file is being dropped into the index file just as if it was written inside here, then we don't need to do that. Hopefully I didn't confuse anybody by that, but let's save this. Let's go ahead and make sure we upload everything that we've done. So now we're linking to this sandbox file. And let's go over to this sandbox file and let's just make a comment really quick. I'm sorry, we need to put PHP tags in there first. You can get pretty elaborate with your commenting at the top of your pages. For right now, we're going to be pretty generic there. And up until now, we've been relying on predefined functions in PHP. And now what we're going to learn how to do is define our own function, similar to how we define a variable that can contain a string of text, a numeric value, or even run a function. We can create our own function to do a bunch of stuff. Think of it kind of like a little mini program, is maybe one way to think of it. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a function that's going to handle grabbing the content and doing all this query information here. So the first thing we need to do to create a function is we need to say function, which is telling PHP that we're about to create a function. And then we need to name the function. We can name the function whatever we want as long as it's not something that's already a predefined function. Let's just go ahead and call this get page. And then parentheses, and then we're going to do curly brackets, and there we go. So this is our function. Everything that's inside these curly brackets is our function. Whatever we do in here is what's going to happen when we run this function. So, and then we can create our own parameters and put them in here. And basically what we're doing with these parameters is sending things to the function. Let's go ahead and save that. So if we go back to our index, we're going to go ahead and highlight all of this, the whole query, and Control X to cut, and go over to our sandbox, and within these curly brackets, Control V to paste. We can kind of tab this back a little bit. Alright, so now we have a function called getPage that's going to run this query and echo out the contents of the page. So we save this, and essentially all we need to do is we can get rid of this include here, and all we need to do is type the name of our function, get page, and our parentheses, semicolon, and we can go ahead and bring this closing PHP tag up here. Now if we save this and upload it, we're gonna have a problem. So let's save and upload. And then let's try and look at one of our pages here. And you'll see that we're getting some of the same errors we had before. Let's go back to our page. And here's something we need to understand, and that is something called scope. we look at our function, we have this dbc variable. All these other variables in here, Q and R and page, are all being created inside this function. However, dbc is not being created inside this function. As far as PHP is concerned, as far as this function is concerned, dbc does not exist. It's empty. So this is where the parameters come along. We need to pass that value to the function. So we're going to, here where we define the function, we're going to say we're going to need this parameter called dbc. Save that. And then when we go back to index, we need to send that value, dbc. Now I just realized that I made a mistake when I said that. dbc is not the only value or variable that's being defined outside of the scope of this function. If we look, we have page, and that's being defined outside of this function. So we need to send page too. So we put a comma and then PG. Save that. Do the same thing here, comma, PG. And if we save and we upload all that, there we go. We're back in business. Now, I want to make sure we reiterate this. What scope means is that when you create this function, it's kind of like its own, like I said, it's its own little program or script that's going to run. And whatever is created in here exists within it. But whatever is created outside of it does not exist in here. So we need to send it to the function, or pass it, which is another term used. And that's why we're doing this. So hopefully that's clear, and it should become clearer as we go further and further into this, making more functions. But now you can see we've cleaned up our code quite a bit. We have our own function that we've created that gets the page, or gets the page contents, which might even be a better term. We might rename this function later. Alright, now I want to show you how to make, we're going to make another function. And in this function, instead of echoing out something, we're going to return something. Now this may not make sense until we do it, and it's going to be a little redundant, and we'll fix some of these redundancies later. But let's create another function, so function, and we'll call this get page title. Now, very similar to what we've done up here in get page, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and copy this whole query here and then paste it here in our function. And let's go ahead and change the select all. Let's just say select title. And then we still want to do everything the way we were doing it. We need to pass these variables, these parameters here, dbc and pg, so we know what page we're getting. But all we want right now is the page title. So we're still going to run this fetch assoc, even though it's only going to come back with one value or one key, and that is the title. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to do what's called return. Return a value. So return page title, and close that. Now what's different about this function is we're not echoing anything out. And this function needs to be handled a little differently. Let's go ahead and save this and go back to our index. Actually, go to our config. So right after we run this, little if statement here to get the page, we're going to run our get page title function. However, we're not just going to run it. What we're going to do is create a variable, and we'll call this page title, and we're going to give it the value of that function, get page title. Send those parameters. And this may seem a little confusing, so let me walk you through this again. So this function's going to run. It's going to run this query, retrieve just the page title, and it's going to do what's called return it. It's going to return the value. So whatever the page title is, it's going to return it back, and that's going to become the value of page underscore title. Save this, upload it. Now the reason we're doing this is now we have this variable called page title, and what we can do is up here in the title tag, we can put in some PHP tags and echo page title. And we might put like a little dash here or something like this. So what this is going to do is now when we go to different pages, it's going to go ahead and dynamically change the page title. It's going to change what is seen up here. It's not going to just say Dynamic Sites LLC. It's going to say the page title dash Dynamic Sites LLC. So let's save that and upload it. Make sure you've uploaded all these things we've done. And let's click around here. There you go. You see it, my gallery, my blog, contact us, and home, or welcome to our site. So it's taking whatever we put in as the page title and it's putting it up here. And the reason I say this is redundant is because we're querying the information about the page twice. And as we get further along, we'll start working on how we can remove some of these redundancies and get all the data at once and utilize it all over the site or all over the page rather than doing these things twice. But I wanted to show you two different types of functions, or well, they're not really different types of functions, but different ways to handle them, different ways to make them do something. So where this one is returning a value, this one is simply echoing out this here, this HTML. So to kind of recap, what we've done here is we've cleaned up our index page. We've got it nice and tidied up. The setup document's starting to grow, which is the whole point of the setup document, to get kind of the initialization of everything out of the way. We've included our functions file. We're running our, get page, figure that out, if statement, and then we're getting the page title by running this function here. This was a pretty quick lesson, but hopefully you learned something here, because these functions that we created, we're going to be creating quite a bit of, and it's kind of the cornerstone of the entire project, is not only creating these functions but being creative with these functions. The next video may be a quick one too, but since we've tidied up our code, I think it's about time we kind of tidy up our site itself and make it a little more attractive. But this time, instead of using Photoshop and things like that, we're going to do everything with CSS. Those of you coming in from the original series, you've got that experience with Photoshop, so you can maybe do some different things. People who are starting with this series and did not start with the building a website and doing the design and all that series, I want to be able to continue this series without having to use Photoshop and things like that if they don't necessarily have to. This is about, the code, so let's utilize the code.